Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories this hour. President Donald Trump warns of a purge or revolution in South Korea hours before meeting new President Lee Jae-myung at the White House. His comments follow prosecutors seeking an arrest warrant for former President Han Duck-soo, accused of backing ex-President Yoon's failed martial law bid last year. At least 20 people, among them 5 journalists, were killed in an Israeli strike on Nasser hospital in southern Gaza. The dead include a Reuters cameraman and an Associated Press reporter, with others killed in a second strike as rescuers rushed to the scene, Gaza officials have stated. Israel says it carried out a strike near Nasser hospital but does not target journalists after 5 of them were killed in the strikes. The Foreign Press Association called for an immediate explanation, with both Reuters and the Associated Press saying they were devastated by the losses. A powerful typhoon is battering Vietnam's coast with winds of up to 133 kilometers an hour, threatening flash floods and landslides. More than 586,000 people have been ordered to evacuate, with soldiers on standby as heavy rains continue to spread across a much larger area. Kilmar Arbredo Garcia, whose wrongful deportation to El Salvador made him a symbol of President Trump's immigration crackdown, has been detained again by U.S. officials in Baltimore. The 30-year-old was freed from custody in Tennessee last week after 5 months in detention and now faces possible removal to Uganda. Israel says it could reduce its military presence in southern Lebanon if the Lebanese army moves to disarm Hezbollah. The statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office followed his meeting with U.S. envoy Tom Barak, who is pushing to plan to disarm the Iran-backed group. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara is expected to speak at the UN General Assembly in New York this September. The al-Shara, who broke with Al-Qaeda in 2016, met President Trump in Saudi Arabia earlier this year in a bid to lift sanctions on Syria. Britain says a record 28,000 migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats this year, a 46% rise on 2024. The surge is fueling public anger and anti-immigrant protests, increasing pressure on Prime Minister Keir Starmer over his immigration policies. Now we start in the United States, where US President Donald Trump has raised questions about South Korea just hours ahead of his meeting with its new President Lee Jae-myung at the White House. Earlier, Trump accused South Korea of being a money machine that takes advantage of American military protection. President Trump has issued a statement on Truth Social where he accused purge in South Korea. This statement, coming right before meeting South Korean President Lee, poses challenge for the trade negotiations and tariff talks that are expected to take place. We are discussing the ongoing and upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and South Korea. Donald Trump has voiced his concerns. We are now joined by Raymond Vickery, who is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, and he joins us live from the American capital of Washington, D.C. Raymond, thank you for joining us. As always, pleasure to talk to you. I just want to first get your insight of a Donald Trump Truth Social post slamming a country, posing a purge or a revolution is going on there, hours before meeting with the South Korean leader in the Oval Office. What are your thoughts, Raymond?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Thomas. This is of a pattern that, unfortunately, our president has shown, and that is that he wants to be the great decider in all things, that he is not only an authoritarian in regard to the United States, but throughout the world, and that he can order things as he sees them. Unfortunately, he does not see things in terms of relationships. What he sees it is in terms of a particular transaction. So it's very difficult to discern why he wants to interfere in domestic politics in South Korea, except that he does play to his MAGA base on the question of people receiving, nations receiving the security guarantees from the United States without paying enough money for it. This goes back to the whole transactional view of the world that President Trump holds. The transactional view in international affairs is particularly harmful because it's not any one action, such as the amount of money that you are going to receive as a part of the defense cooperation, but it's a question of a larger relationship. It's a question of building democracy, the values that the United States and even South Korea, Japan, other great democracies, India have adopted over the years as to how to secure those. So this is very antithetical to what needs to be done. To have a coalition of democracies concerned about human rights throughout the world and is a step backward in security. Other nations, of course, are watching, whether they be Japan, whether they be India, and if he can take this approach in regard to South Korea, they start to wonder, well, what about our security cooperation with the U.S.?
Raymond, of course, and you see, as you said, you've seen patterns here where Donald Trump does criticize, and of course his administration and his allies do criticize foreign governments and the actions of them, Brazil being an example, Germany, France, another. What does Donald Trump get out of doing this? And do you think he has a real impact in world politics?
Well, it has an impact, but it's very harmful because it destroys the trust which has to underlie any of these relationships. If there isn't any trust, if you can't put any value in what one says or what one commits to, then you can't build coalitions for peace and prosperity. And you rightly point out this is of a pattern with NATO, saying NATO countries weren't doing enough. Brazil doesn't like the way Bolsonaro is being treated. Interference in without any discernible strategy other than the aggrandizement of President Trump. Somehow he thinks that the more he it just interferes wherever it is, that more likely he is to get a Nobel Peace Prize or be praised as a great man. He's having an impact. He may well be at times Man of the Year or something like that, but it's not because of a positive impact. It's negative, but he doesn't seem to see that. He comes from a background in television, reality TV shows where the more publicity you got for firing people or doing things which were seemingly outrageous, the better it was for your TV ratings. And that's the man's mindset. It's a very, very difficult and dangerous time for all of us in the democracies of the world, and the United States, quite frankly, needs the help of others to provide some form of stability here, which President Trump seems bent on destroying.
Raymond, obviously this meeting is going to come up later today. Trump, prior to it, has accused South Korea of being a money machine that takes advantage of American military protection. Could you describe to us a little bit the relationship between Seoul and Washington from your experience?
Well, ever since the North Koreans and then the Chinese tried to destroy South Korea by an invasion across the 48th parallel, the United States has worked to encourage democracy, encourage the institutionalization of those fundamentals which are necessary for cooperation among democratic nations. That progress has been uneven. It goes up and down, but that's true of any democracy. But what Trump is doing is turning this history of building democracy, values, relationships on its head. And what he's doing is saying, well, if you can't do what I say today and flatter me as the great man, then you're going to suffer the consequences for it. And those consequences first show up in regard to tariffs, but they also show up in regard to demands for greater amounts of money or material in regard to the security arrangements. This is an extremely dangerous and contrarian way of conducting foreign policy. It has not been the case under presidents really since the 19th century here in this country. So we're in a difficult situation, but this is just the latest example of a pattern in practice, which is that of President Donald J. Trump.
Raymond Vickery, pleasure to have you on the program as always. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. For our next story, we head back over to West Asia, where Palestinians held funeral processions today for the 5 journalists and others killed in Israeli strikes on Gaza's Nasser medical complex. Reuters confirmed cameraman Hussam al-Masri and freelancer Mariam Abu Daga were killed, while photographers Hatem Khaled was wounded. The agency said it was devastated and urged urgent medical help for Khaled. Health officials have also named Mariam Abu Daga and freelancer for the Associated Press and Al Jazeera cameraman Mohammad Salama among the dead, along with a civil defense worker. Here's what some of the victims' family had to say on the issue.
When and where is it going to end? Are we going to let the Israel Defense Forces continue the repeated killing of journalists?
The Israeli military said it struck near Nasser Hospital, and the chief of staff has ordered an inquiry. It reiterated that it does not target journalists, while Gaza's media union called the attack deliberate. Turkey condemned the strike as a war crime aimed at silencing the press. Press freedom group Reporters Without Borders urged a strong international response, stressing the 3rd floor was a known workspace for reporters. More than 240 Palestinian journalists have been killed since the war began in October of 2023. Here is what Reporters Without Borders Director General Thibaut Brutin had to say. Okay, bear with us while we get that statement for you.
And are we going to let the Israel Defense Forces continue the repeated killing of journalists? There is international law. There are guarantees that should be granted to journalists covering conflicts. And none of that seems to be applying. So we need to be very clear about the fact that none of the journalists that are allegedly terrorists are terrorists. They are professional journalists working for legacy professional media, like, for example, Reuters or, for example, AP.
We're now joined by Ahmed Fatwa, who's a spokesperson for the Fatah movement. He joins us live from Ramallah. Thank you very much for joining us, Ahmed, here on the program. Can I get your reaction, please, Ahmed, to the death of these 20 individuals, 5 of them being journalists working for various news organizations covering the war in Gaza? What is your response to the deaths of these individuals?
A grotesque war crime, a barbarity, cruel act by the Israeli occupation, another crime and war crime added to the list of the numerous war crimes that they have been doing for the past 22 months. It is astonishing, it is outrageous that this regime continues to do these crimes with full impunity and without any outrage from world governments or from United States or from all the superpowers of the world that are watching the Palestinian people suffering this brutality and barbarity for the last 22 months without any action. It is shame and disgrace upon this world that watch children dying and living in fear and terror while it's silent, and not only silent, but giving Israel all the tools and all the mechanism to continue its massacres and with the impunity they enjoy in the international community and United Nations. We ask for the international community to take its moral obligation to stop this criminality. Today, 20 between journalists and medical workers and civil defense workers were targeted deliberately and directly by the Israeli occupation, the ruthless Israeli occupation that care not about Palestinian lives, that shows glaring racism, glaring supremacist ideologies against the Palestinian people and calling for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That demands from the international community to take the moral obligation to protect the international law, to protect the human lives, to protect the children who are suffering for the past 22 months. Are we living in the law of the jungle? Is this the end of the international law? We need answers. If this is the law of the jungle, then let the world burn. But we are here to defend the international law, to defend the international humanitarian law, and to defend our values, to build a civil and modern world that respects the lives of journalists, that respects the lives of doctors and children.
Ahmed, Israel has, of course, responded to this attack, as have many other bodies, but it has said that it is going to conduct an initial inquiry into the strikes. It also said that it regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists. Your response to this statement and the trustworthiness of an IDF investigation into a matter like this?
At this stage, it's pointless and useless to bring any justification by the Israeli occupation. Conducting investigation, this is maybe a number 1,000 investigation in the last 2 months alone. It is lies, it's propaganda, and Israel is the criminal and the perpetrator and should not be even taken any way seriously or even presented in the news, because this is a criminal regime that's doing crimes intentionally, deliberately, and openly saying it. So we have to be wise enough and to be intelligent enough to regret or dismiss these, lip service that they are doing. But we know too well what they are doing, and that is the exterminating of the Palestinian people. We see it. The reports is there. The IPC has a report of famine. The world is reporting about the deliberate targeting of journalists, medical staff, hospitals, schools, everything. There's enough war crimes to look at Israel as the criminal. So it's time to look at Israel of what it is, a criminal regime that is killing and colonizing other people's lands. So I think it's time to stop this. And for the sake for the journalists, your very colleagues who are being targeted, more than 200 killed. Why they are killed? It is to silence the truth, it's to hide the truth. Why they refuse international journalists to go to Gaza? To silence the truth and to hide the truth. And the truth is that Israel is doing unprecedented barbaric criminality, and we see it by our own eyes. So it's time to not take anything from Israel except that they are criminals and should be chased in the world court, and the international community should do its moral obligation to defend the defenseless Palestinian people and to save our humanitarian law.
Ahmed, last week when a prominent Al Jazeera journalist was killed alongside five others, Israel were immediate to label him Hamas. They claimed to have provided evidence. Given Israel's minimal response to this, they of course responded, but not in the same way. Do you think what do you think that says about this attack, given their not as upfront accusations as before?
Israel, with this full impunity, with this full-fledged support by the complicit United States in this genocide, does not care at justification or giving any reasons for their crimes. They are doing crimes, and the world is just watching, unfortunately. Last, Anas, the journalist from Al Jazeera, was not member of Hamas at all. This is a lie, and they know too well that this is a lie, because using the word Hamas to explain every criminal under the sun, that is, a joke. So we have to stop listening to these statements by the Israeli occupation. Now they killed a journalist, and this is the number more than 240 killed. So are they all Hamas? Of course not. Now today we have seen them targeting them deliberately. Then the paramedics coming up to rescue them, to try to rescue, to collect the bodies, and they directly hit them with a drone. That is, a very clear war crime, and we should not take anything to explain this except an independent international committee to investigate the war crimes that has been going on in Palestine for the past 22 months. Any less than that is giving justification to the Israeli occupation. Israel is not a democratic country. Israel is not a country that respects freedom or human rights. It is violating the international, it's violating the democracy, it's violating all our values. It's time to deal with Israel as the way it is, the criminal, the war criminal it is.
Ahmed, do stay with us here on the program. We have some further updates from West Asia. In a significant development, Israel has signaled it will scale back its military presence in southern Lebanon if the Lebanese armed forces move to disarm Hezbollah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office made the announcement following talks with US envoy Tom Barak. Netanyahu's statement emphasized Israel's readiness to reduce its military presence in a phased approach should Lebanon take action. This comes after Lebanon's cabinet tasked the military with establishing state control over arms by December, while Israel has maintained a presence in southern Lebanon since last November's ceasefire. Hezbollah has rejected calls to disarm. The situation remains tense, with Israel continuing periodic strikes against Hezbollah facilities. Now, we are once again joined by Ahmed Fatwa to discuss this further. Ahmed, your current thoughts on the situation in southern Lebanon right now? Of course, Israel occupying the south after a ceasefire was declared last November. However, the Iran-backed group Hezbollah has declined to disarm. Your thoughts on the situation and the difficulties that the Lebanese government finds itself in?
Israel has no right to occupy any Lebanese lands or any other land. They must retreat immediately and let the Lebanese government to take control of their land and to express their sovereignty and independent nationality. So what we say as a Palestinian from the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Israel must end its occupation in southern Lebanon, also its occupation in southern Syria, and all its occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. Let the Lebanese people deal with their issues independently and to express their sovereignty without any intervention by Israel. Lebanon is going in the right direction. They are uniting their country. They are legitimizing the weapons to be under the hand of the army. But with the Israel existence and occupation on the land, actually is hindering this effort and crippling this effort, because it's giving excuses to all groups or militant groups to say that we cannot drop our weapons as long as there is occupation. We have to resist it. So Israel's existence in these lands must drop, and we fully support the Lebanese government efforts to take control and to unite Lebanon and to express its sovereignty in all the Lebanese lands.
Ahmed Fatwa, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure to speak to you as always. We now move back over to the United States for our next update, where Kilmar Albrado Garcia has been taken into custody after arriving at a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement office in Baltimore. In a statement, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has confirmed his arrest and said that ICE are processing him for deportation. He was mistakenly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador in March and then brought back to face criminal charges. As per his lawyers, U.S. authorities have informed him he may be deported to Uganda following his refusal to accept a plea deal. The legal team of Garcia have also accused the U.S. of trying to coerce him to plead guilty by threatening to redeport him halfway across the world. Supporters held a rally outside the premises in support of the Salvadorian national, whose drawn-out immigration case has made global headlines. His supporters now fear he faces a second deportation, this time to Uganda, a country where he has no known ties. Let's listen in to what Garcia has to say.
Nuestra comunidad nos respalda y al final se va a hacer justicia. El amor y la familia triunfará, independientemente de lo que pase hoy.
Regardless of what happens here today,
Con ICE, prométenme esto,
in my ICE checking, promise me this,
que seguirán luchando, orando, creyendo en la dignidad y la libertad, no solo para mí, para todos.
We stay in the region for our next story, where President Donald Trump praises the US government's new 10% stake in Intel, valued at around $8.9 billion, saying it boosts jobs and national wealth. The funding partly comes from the CHIPS Act and aims to strengthen secure chip production in the United States. On Truth Social, Trump states, "I make deals that I like for our country all day long," calling critics stupid people and celebrating the rise in Intel stock as a win for American workers and the economy. White House advisor Kevin Hassett says the deal is part of a broader strategy to build a U.S. sovereign wealth fund. Trump signs an executive order in February to launch the fund, modeled after nations like Norway and China. Officials emphasize that the government does not interfere in company operations, saying the primary goal is to onshore production and increase national economic security. We're now joined by Peter Cardillo. He's a chief market economist at Capital Securities, and he joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us. Why is this such an important story in the United States, and how does it affect the U.S. economy, the American and the American people, and what makes Trump's approach so different in regards to other presidents here?
Well, to begin with, it's positive in the sense that Trump said that the government will not interfere with the governance of Intel, and so that means other companies as well. That's a positive point, because obviously it means that the government is not muddling in the running of the company, and so from that perspective, this is good news, and I think the market likes it, and you can see that investors are applauding this announcement. Of course, when you have a capitalistic free system, if the government were to interfere and take over the company, that would certainly not be good, and that would be that would have negative consequences, not only for any individual company that the government is planning to invest in, and in general for the economy and the stock market as well. But I think from the perspective of the 10% investment, that could be a positive sign, and eventually, with this creation of a sovereign fund that he's talking about, that means that the American people might actually be able to get some sort of dividends. So from that perspective, it's good news.
Peter, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX. Well, pleasure to talk to you as always. Well, that is all that we have time for this hour, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.